Hey, you guys, it's Friday again, and that means it's time for another movie retrospective. And now we're finally getting around to doing this.
Yeah, getting around to Blade Runner.
It's just funny because this is like such an iconic, like a classic and everything. And it's like we did Blade Runner 2049 first, which I guess is a little weird. But we always knew that eventually we were going to get around to doing the original classic. Now, before we get too much into this, we should say, as you all know, if you're fans of the original Blade Runner, there are like 7 or 8 different versions of this shit floating around.
Yeah, and Jenny got me a copy of the final cut on Blu-ray.
Yes.
A couple months back, and boy, it took us a long time to even get around to watching it.
I know, we have so many movies, and it's like now we have Shudder, we have Netflix, we have, we watch stuff on Tubi and shit like that. So it's like we just... and I have a lot of work to do too, so I don't have time to just like sit around watching stuff. But we finally got around to watching
and first off, I'd like to say that on Blu-ray, Blade Runner looks fantastic. It looks better on Blu-ray than it's ever looked. Like if you ever saw this on VHS, or with the old CRT televisions, you don't know what you're missing. I mean, this thing, it looks really, really good. It has held up over the years in terms of just, the way things are shot and the matte paintings and the models and... Yeah, it looks good.
It still amazes me that this movie looks the way it looks from 1982. And like I said, all you kids out there, no CGI. Didn't have CGI in 1982. All of that is models, set design, matte paintings.
Yeah.
All of that. And actually, a lot of the buildings that are in there are actually real buildings that were in LA and stuff like that. But the city streets, that's actually a backlot. It's the backlot that's usually used for New York City, like in some movies when they shoot it on a backlot, but it's just set dressed.
Right.
So, and it's amazing to me that looks like...
Right.
I mean, I like in the sense that it looks kind of like a set because you get this like claustrophobic, like it's LA. It's like, I guess the implication being that the pollution is so bad that like the sun never comes out. So it's like always nighttime and it's always raining.
Well, it can get kind of orange.
Yeah. And it's just like this dark, oppressive...
Yeah.
And honestly, when this movie came out, I mean, it got mixed reviews at the time. Like, everyone was talking about, it was visually stunning. There was really nothing like this. But some people were like, oh, they didn't really know what was going on. Like I said, a lot of the reviews from 1982 came from the theatrical cut, which famously had the voiceover, which Harrison Ford hated and didn't want to do. That was like a studio
I grew up with
thing.
it. I actually liked the voiceover.
I don't like
had
it
the Sam Spade voice. I was just used to it.
Yeah, like I know that it gave it more of a film noir kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Because that was something that film noir usually had, the hard-boiled detective, like given the, this is how this shit is, blah, at the beginning. But like I said, Harrison Ford really, really, really did not want to do it. It was done later on after... the studio was afraid that test audiences, they won't know what's going on, and you have to kind of come and explain.
I think they were correct about that. Because the voiceover actually helped us along through the movie.
Yeah.
Especially if you were younger. During this time when this movie came out, the modern science fiction genre, from aliens and, it was new.
Yeah.
So it helped describe the setting of the way the planet was.
Yeah, true. I think that I guess sci-fi wasn't new as a genre, but it was... I think the 70s were the first time that sci-fi had been taken seriously.
Right, it was realistic sci-fi.
And was at least in movies. I mean, it had been in books for many, decades before that, but it does seem like it was the first time that it was taken seriously and used as like a commentary on present day, like, socio-political issues and things like that.
And the fans were different back then. I remember it. I saw this in theater. I'll tell you a story about it. I saw this in theater. In those days, science fiction fans were young. The older generations didn't give a shit about science fiction.
Yeah.
When you went there, the theater was pretty much empty. Just teenagers.
Well, it's like horror. It's like a skewed younger.
So, having the voiceover helped teenagers actually kind of get through the movie to understand what was going on.
Because this is kind of some deep shit.
Yeah.
Blade Runner, it's a deep movie.
Yeah. It's a, futuristic world run by corporations. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar?
Well, yeah,
run by corporations that kind of usurped the government power, and in this story, they're creating slaves. They're taking genetically engineered people and assembling them to skirt slavery laws, so you can keep your civilization going.
Yeah, because it's technically not a person.
Technically, it's not a person.
But it's a person in every way, except that ostensibly they don't feel any empathy or they don't have any feelings. Although they only give them a 4-year lifespan because they're afraid that they will develop emotions and feelings, which they do seem to do.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of like, I mean, obviously everybody knows this is based on a 1968 Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric
Which
Sheep?
I read, and it's nothing like the movie, really.
It's really not a lot. Like no. the kind of bare bones of the story are similar. But I feel like, one, they don't use the word replicant in the book. It's android or Andes, they call them.
Yeah.
Also, the androids are less sympathetic. I feel like in the movie Blade Runner...
Yeah, they're psychopaths.
In the movie Blade Runner, because here's the thing, like Philip K. Dick came out and said the androids in the book were actually... they were inspired by, I mean, the novel that he'd written previous to this book was Man in the High Castle. So for doing research for that, he had read like a lot of diaries of like high-ranking Nazis. And he's like, so I used that as like that was kind of a parallel to the androids, because he was like, they seemed human but they had no sympathy, they had no empathy for other people, like, and he got that from like reading Nazi diaries. So in the book, the androids are not really sympathetic characters. So there were a lot of screenplays written for what would eventually become Blade Runner. Interestingly, the term Blade Runner is also not in the book, and it came from a book, I believe it was by William S. Burroughs, like a novella, and he just liked the title of it, so he said, can I just use that title? It doesn't have anything to do with what the novella is about. But he's like, I just like that title, and so he bought the rights to use that title.
Yeah.
Originally it was called Dangerous Days, I think.
And the characters were all different, too.
Yeah.
In the book.
Yeah.
You know,
it was just a different... But
Roy was more like a farmer type, not really a soldier.
Right.
And I think Pris and Rachel were kind of merged into just Pris. Pris
and Rachel were the same model. They
Right.
looked exactly alike. So there was the whole thing about Deckard falling in love with Rachel, but then he had to kill Pris still, so it was like kind of weird because they looked exactly alike.
Yeah, and they also had things like artificial insects and real insects too. You know, it was pretty weird. And finding artificial horned toads out in the desert.
And
then there was this process called Kipple.
Yeah.
Remember Kipple? Did you read the book?
A very, very long time
Kipple
ago.
was like something in this culture. It's not in the movie, but it's in the book. Debris. Things that break down and fall up and turn into junk, it becomes Kipple. That's how I remembered it. And that Kipple was taking over the earth. Yeah. Because it was just falling apart. It's just in crazy television shows, you know.
But like I said, I liked it. Honestly, I think the, Philip K. Dick actually died shortly before this movie came out. He did actually read a few iterations of the script. He didn't like most of them, but then, the later one that David Peoples mostly did.
He saw some of the drawings and
He saw some of the,
photographs.
Of the, kind of special effects work and stuff, and he really, really liked it. Like, he said, that world, that's exactly what I pictured, like, when I wrote it, but sadly, he did not get to see the finished movie. He died actually quite young. He was only 53, I think.
He was a substance abuser, I'll tell you, that guy, and he was a little bit crazy.
Well, most writers are.
Yeah, he was crazy.
I have to tell you. Well, most creative people
are
a little bit crazy. Otherwise, they're not any good.
He also did Total Recall, and a lot of his stuff is turned into movies.
Well, and honestly, Blade Runner was kind of the beginning of that, because even though, I mean, it went a little bit over budget, it went a little bit over time, and it did okay at the box office, not great. You have to think, this is the same thing that happened with The Thing. 1982, that was the same year E.T. came out. That was the same year Rocky 3 came out. And those just, like, stomped all over every other movie, pretty much, that came out that year, that summer. So, and Blade Runner was a little cerebral, I feel like. It did well, like I said, and it did well critically, sort of half and half. But really, it wasn't until a little bit later that it got, like, a critical reassessment, an audience reassessment. It started, like, building up a cult classic. And honestly, Blade Runner, I feel like, is probably, if not the most influential science fiction movie pretty much ever made. I mean, it took cues from, film noir. It took cues from Metropolis, from the 20s and stuff. But I feel like the look of Blade Runner, every single sci-fi movie that came after that, every video game that came after that, I mean, that was kind of like the whole cyberpunk thing, came from that pretty much. Yeah. And I think I read, this might have been on the Wikipedia page, but they said that Blade Runner is actually, the music and the dialogue format are the most sampled music and dialogue from any movie of the 20th century.
I remember when it was in the theaters, I was getting the feedback I was getting from people at the time that saw it, they didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I was visiting my dad in Mississippi at the time that this came out. And it was playing at the Sawmill Square Mall. I was watching one movie, and I passed the theater where Blade Runner was playing. And I just cracked open the door, and I heard, it sounds like, the audio of a fight scene or something happening. So I walked in just in time to see Daryl Hannah turning Deckard's face around right into her crotch. She was beating him up and breaking his nose and stuff.
That was like the best.
I was
scene
just
for
like,
you to
whoa,
walk
what the fuck is this movie about? God damn. So week after that, I went to go see it, and it was R-rated, and I wasn't old enough to see an R-rated movie. So I got a ticket for one movie and then went into that one to go see it.
Which a lot of us did
that's
back
how
in
we
the
used
day.
to play it back then. We didn't follow the rules. Never followed the rules even back then. We just made it look like we were following the rules. So I snuck into there and watched it. It was pretty good. I liked it.
Yeah.
Although I was very disoriented at the time. You know what I mean? Like, wow, what kind of movie is this? And I didn't know anything about directors. I didn't know that Ridley Scott, was involved in this. I didn't make the connection that this was the same universe that Alien 1 was from. And I don't think Alien 2 had come out yet.
No.
So
this was his movie after Alien.
Right. So it was pretty cool, and it continues on into Prometheus and into Alien Covenant. And, when you get into those movies, it makes Blade Runner make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
That they have all these, basically huge tycoons and robber barons and big corporations trying to build slave races of androids and replicants, to expand human conquest of the universe. They're making new colonies on other planets. And, when they said the off-world colonies in Blade Runner, at that time I was thinking, what, Mars?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I didn't realize that they were going to other solar systems.
Right.
I didn't realize they had that technology. Although it was inferred, it said several times in Blade Runner that if you couldn't pass certain physicals, you had to stay on Earth.
Yeah.
And that everybody else was leaving. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
that seemed like where the germ of the idea for Gattaca came from, which is another movie we should.
Earth was a
do,
shithole country, basically.
Well, and the thing about Blade Runner too, and there's kind of things about. They actually initially didn't want Harrison Ford to be in it. Not they didn't want him, but he wasn't like their first choice. When the script was written, they actually wanted Robert Mitchum because of the whole neo-noir thing. Then they wanted Dustin Hoffman, but Dustin Hoffman was like, that's not the kind of character I usually play. No, thank you. So then finally they got Harrison Ford to do it. Now, Harrison Ford and Ridley Scott, they made up later on. But there was a very famously contentious relationship between the two of them. Now, Ridley Scott has gone on record, and I'm sorry if this is a spoiler alert for you guys, but he has gone on record as saying, yes, Deckard was a replicant. And if you watch the final director's cut, which is the one that I bought you that's on Blu-ray, the scene where where Deckard has the unicorn dream, and then there's the origami unicorn at the end that Gaff leaves and everything, and that's, meant to say... I know what you're thinking because all your memories are implanted. So Ridley Scott has said, yes, Deckard is a replicant. Now, Harrison Ford was like, fuck that, I'm not a replicant. Yeah. And then he was like, I didn't play it like that. But the interesting thing is that even though he didn't play it like that, the interesting thing to me in this movie is that the replicants seem more human than the humans. And they even kind of say that. That's Tyrell's whole thing. It's more human than human. But it actually does end up being true because even though the replicants are kind of, they do sociopathic things, but the humans in the story are also very emotionally dead inside. Everyone seems to live by themselves. Everyone's very lonely. And particularly Deckard's character seems very detached. And so it's kind of an interesting, and even the end where Roy Batty, before he dies, that he actually saves Harrison Ford's life, even though he didn't have to. He could have just let him. So it was almost like he was a better person, a more moral person than Deckard was. Yeah,
well, in Blade Runner 2049, the guy that's making replicants is basically calling them his angels.
Yeah.
And this kind of ties in with stuff that happened in Prometheus and about human corruption. If you look at Blade Runner 2049 and the whole expanded universe, humans are bad.
Yeah.
That's, and one of the reasons why they're making these replicants and these androids is because they're better than humans.
Yeah.
That's what they're, they're...
Right.
The guys that are making them are trying to make better replacements for humans, that humans aren't very good.
Yeah.
And they kind of show, a lot of scenes in Blade Runner 2049 of how real humans act, and they're assholes.
Yeah.
A lot of corruption in them, So
like I said, that was something that was Scott's vision, because that wasn't really in the original book, where he's kind of making the implication, and this was a little bit clearer, I think, in the director's cut, because, I mean, like I said, the theatrical cut, that had, like, the happy ending and all that crap. But, like, the later one that was restored that's actually closest to Scott's vision, it does seem to make a lot clearer that the replicants are more sympathetic than any of the humans than any of the humans in the story. I mean, you feel bad for them.
Right.
They escaped from slavery, and Roy Batty even says to Deckard's character, he's like, I want you to feel fear like we feel. He wants him to empathize with him, but Deckard doesn't really seem to, even though he does eventually, fall in love with Rachel and everything like that. And, so he kind of redeems himself at the end. But I think that's kind of like the whole kind of theme of all of those movies, like Prometheus and all the way up to present day is
you might as well throw in Soldier in there too from with Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Because
you didn't say Crussell.
Crussell, didn't say Crussell. But when Roy's dying, he talks about that he mentions Tannhauser Gate. Ships on fire and Tannhauser Gate. Tannhauser Gate was one of the tattoos that Crussell had on his arm from Soldier, one of the battles that he fought in.
Yeah, so you can see how there was some crossover there. Right. But yeah, I think one of the underlying themes of the whole universe is really, once you get to a point of artificial intelligence where, maybe the replicants are better than humans, is there really any difference? And I think there was kind of like this whole moral thing in Blade Runner too, of like, Deckard almost coming to the realization that he's like, they're the same as me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's, like I said, that's something that like what makes us human. If you have implanted, like Rachel's character, for example, she had implanted memories that she thought were real, because she thought she was a person. She shows Deckard the picture. She's like, look, this is me when I was little. And he's like, yeah, no, that's Tyrell's niece. They implanted all those memories and all the Nexus 6s.
You can also connect this in with David from Prometheus and Alien Covenant. David was supposed to be an improved human.
Yeah.
Supposed to be better than a human. But in the end, he ended up doing evil stuff too. And he started to develop hatred. So it's just, I don't know. Are they better? Maybe not. Are we better than them? Are they better than us? I think part of the message there is just consciousness has certain emergent properties to it that when you're dealing with reality, you start to become corrupt. I think that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing too is that, the more human that they get, the more flawed that they get.
Right.
So like I said, there is no difference in the end.
Right.
If you can make something to that, that proximity to a human being, then there is no difference.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the lot you're thinking when you're a child is very different from when you're an adult. When you're a child, you kind of believe in things. You know what I mean? You can't tend to be kind of, they call it innocent,
Yeah.
But as you get older, you start to become kind of corrupt in a certain way, and that's what they're talking about.
Some more than others.
Yeah, some more than others. And some people get corrupted at earlier ages than others.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's an occupational hazard of being a human being.
Exactly.
And so, like I said, the closer, and I think that's kind of the point that
reality's a little too complicated.
Right. That's the point that he's trying to make, is that is that you're doomed to failure. Yeah. If the closer you try to make these robots, essentially, the more human you try to make them, the more likely things are to go drastically wrong. Did you know that Daryl Hannah was actually, I know this is kind of like out of left field, but did you know that Daryl Hannah was actually not the first choice to play Pris? Do you know who was?
No.
Debbie Harry.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
They actually wanted Debbie Harry, and Debbie Harry actually kind of wanted to do it, but her record company said, no, that's going to take too much time out of your music career, so you better not. And she later on said that she regretted it.
Oh, yeah, she should have done that.
She actually would have been really good at
that. That movie made Daryl Hannah's career, actually.
It did, yeah.
And had it been Debbie Harry, she probably would have been in more movies and in better movies.
Yeah, well, she was in a. She was in.
She was in a lot. Yeah, she was, but she would have been in more, I think.
Yeah, probably. But like I said, this what can you say about this movie that hasn't already been said like a million times?
Yeah.
It's like this is, like I said, easily.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, you have to see it.
One of the most, if not the most, influential. I mean, shit, look at all the fucking video games that came after. Look at all the sci-fi that came after. Look at all the fiction that came after.
All the knockoffs like Trancers.
We keep bringing that up.
Yeah, very Trancers.
It's just so
that was
funny
a terrible
because,
movie, man.
Well, because you had kind of hyped it to me a little bit.
I remember
you
it being,
liking it a lot, and then we saw it, and I'm like,
what the fuck?
that's really not good.
Didn't age well.
Your memory is really
My memory wasn't that good about it.
Speaking
well,
of memories,
back in those days, I remember my buddies were watching. We were probably talking through most of it anyway.
Yeah, so you just like every now and then you glance
say,
at it and go,
yeah,
cool.
That's right, all it was.
I don't know.
It was a different time.
That doesn't happen to me quite as much. Honestly, I have to say a lot of movies that I liked back in the 80s and then I watch them again. Usually I'm like, oh, that's better than I remembered. Every now and then I'll see one and I'm just
With Trancers,
wow.
the first 10 or 15 minutes was interesting. And then it just started to fall apart, and then it continued to fall apart, and it just kept falling apart.
Yeah.
And
I was like, when it first came on, I'm like, well, it looks kind of cheap, but that's, that's not a deal breaker. I'm all right with that. And it's like, then I was watching it, I'm like...
It got worse and worse and worse and worse.
Like, what the hell is going on? It's like, I thought you said this was good.
Couldn't even understand it.
You lied to me. But yeah, so...
And they made like 4 or 5 of those things. I wonder if they
did. It was kind of like...
Maybe they get better.
I highly, highly doubt that. And I'm not going to like take time out of... There's a lot of good movies out there that we could be watching.
The one that I really am mad that I missed back in the day was Phantasm as it was coming out. I wish I had seen it because that was actually a really good series that got better as it went.
I didn't see the first one when it came out. I saw the second one when it came out because I saw it in the theater. And then I went back and watched the first one because I had missed the first one also. Yeah. But I did see the second one in the theater when it came out.
That's a good series.
I know. And it's like, it's weird because I saw that, but then like I never saw like 3, 4, and 5 or anything like that. But
that was one of the few series that got better as it went.
Yeah, that never happens.
The last one, I was like, wow, it was awesome. It became like, it was like Mad Max and the end of the world.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's a lot you can do with that.
Yeah.
And, getting back to Blade Runner, that's kind of like why, I think that's why that movie has stood the test of time. One, because it looks amazing. And like I said, pro tip, if you're ever going to make a sci-fi movie or, write sci-fi, it's more movie than book. I guess a book you can get away with a lot more. But... if you don't want your sci-fi to age, 1, don't use CGI.
Right.
2, don't try to make it like futuristic. It's better to like go back to the past.
It's better to make things look used.
Get your used future thing.
Yeah.
That's why Star Wars still works. The original Star Wars trilogy. That's why Blade Runner still works because they went back to the 40s. They went back to. They didn't try to make everybody like, oh, let's put like these big pointy like shiny shoulder
everything
pads
looks brand
on everything.
new.
Right.
All the war machines have a fresh coat of paint on them and stuff. No. You want chipped paint, you want rust, you want oil smudges on things, you want it to be wet everywhere,
Yeah.
The way reality really looks.
Right. And the thing about Blade Runner 2 is that, everybody, like a lot of people were poor, so you'd be using like old shit. You know what I mean? And the same thing with the original Star Wars trilogy. It's like, we live on this like backwater planet, and it's like, so we have to get like all these fucking junk shit from the intergalactic version of Goodwill.
And it looked like everything was modified and upgraded, like an old cars with new stuff stuck on it to keep it relevant.
Yeah. So I think that's why, sci-fi movies like that have, just because you don't try to like make, because there's so many sci-fi movies that came out in the 80s that we're trying to like, this Total Recall suffered from this a little bit too, where it's like, let's make everything look super futuristic, but then when you watch it now, you're like, wow, that is so 1990. Yeah. Because everyone's hair and like everyone just, so it's just go back to some iconic time period. Sure, you'd be doing a movie, and I think, like I said, Blade Runner, since it went back to the 40s, like everyone just looked like it's like femme fatale, hard-boiled detective.
Tell you what, though, one of the futuristic movies that did stand the test of time and still looks good to this day is Demolition Man. The vehicles really do look like cars of today.
They got the cars correct,
They got a lot of stuff correct on
Although
on
in
that.
20, 30 years, it might look dated. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, well, hard to say.
I would never, like, if anybody ever asked me.
The matte shots look really good. It just, the concept, cars that blow foam into the cabin to keep you from getting crushed, during the impact. Yeah. They just got a lot of stuff right in that. What was it, teleconferencing?
Yeah.
Social credit score. They have all that.
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's if I would probably never do a sci-fi just because, like I said, I'm more like an old school horror person. But if anybody ever asked me to make a sci-fi movie, I would definitely go the route of, using some iconic period in history rather than trying to make everything look futuristic. You know what I mean? Or just make everything look functional. Like, don't try to make, because like I said, I think a little bit Back to the Future kind of, the second one kind of fell into that too, where it's like everything was super 80s and it's like all these big puppy jackets.
Yeah,
and
they
shit
just
like
they
that.
just take whatever's popular now and make it extreme.
Yeah, and it's like
turn it up. That's not the way the future works.
No, the future does not work like that. I mean, it's cyclical. I think people think of it as like a progression.
A dead giveaway is that they were making that stuff in the late '80s and they just didn't foresee the internet or the impact of the internet.
Hardly anyone did.
No.
That's really crazy.
Nope.
But
So what they had. Terrible looking 3D holograms and fax machines all in the house. Remember that?
That was hilarious.
And lots of televisions that would come out of the ceiling. And that's not the way the future was.
Fax machines of all things.
Instead of internet, they could just show more cable televisions more cable channels.
Yeah, it's like,
at the same
you can
time.
watch 50 channels at once.
That's
ADD. Which, But like I said,
they got all that wrong.
Reason Blade Runner works is because they didn't do any of that shit,
Yeah.
really. I mean, they kind of, you get focus more on the characters, focus more on, they had androids. That's still way ahead, way in the future, probably. At least ones that look exactly like humans. But...
Well, the replicants weren't androids. Replicants were more like Frankensteins. You make a bunch of internal organs, you grow them, and then you assemble it and bring the thing to life and give it memories, so it doesn't know what it is.
Yeah.
The androids, they had those, but you don't see those until Alien 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With what was that character's name?
Oh yeah. Crap.
Yeah, the one that tried to shove that rolled up newspaper.
Bishop?
No. Bishop was the second one.
He was the other one, yeah.
He took that rolled up magazine, tried to stuff it down.
Yeah.
Down Ripley's throat.
Yeah.
But when they saw that was a robot, they were surprised that it was a robot. So I don't think that they were very common.
Yeah, true. I feel like the whole, and I think there's kind of an underlying thing too of like the Tyrell Corporation, because in Blade Runner, you're thinking, oh, well, they're just making replicants like as slave labor, essentially. But I think as the series went on, it kind of got more to the thing where they just wanted to replace humans altogether.
Yeah, they wanted to get rid of humans.
Yeah.
Humans wouldn't obey.
Right.
Yeah,
I know.
Now,
so.
I'm trying to sort it out in the timeline, according through Prometheus and everything. I guess in the Blade Runner time, there would have been primitive androids that were robots. Sebastian had things that looked like they may have been androids. The little
he built those. Yeah,
right. So
they were his friends.
Yeah, so he knew about genetic design and robotics. So he was kind of doing both, but it looked like the genetic stuff was moving along more quickly than the robotics at that time.
Yeah, which is funny because the original Blade Runner is supposed to be set in 2019, which is only a few months away now.
Yeah,
only like a month away, which is pretty weird.
Yeah, and we have a lot better technology than they had in terms of computer technology.
Yeah, but like I said, it doesn't.
There was no way that they would have known, and this is an alternate future anyway.
And it doesn't really stand out to me much in Blade Runner because, like I said, it's not all whiz bang like, oh, there's big computers everywhere and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, people have like computer monitors and various things, and they look old and clunky, but it's like the whole place looks poor and gross and beat up and everything.
In the book, which is the source material, the world was falling apart and it was all made out of junk anyway.
That's what I mean.
So, the Blade Runner world of 2019 would have had CRT televisions and stuff that was thrown together just out of old junk.
Yeah, because people would have just picked it out of a garbage pile because they couldn't afford to buy one.
And just remade it into something else.
Yeah, so that's why it doesn't bother me, like I said. And it's, that's why it's aged so well, is because it had that whole used future thing. They didn't try to make it look like super futuristic or anything like that. So, like I said, I think that's why.
It looked like Detroit.
Yeah, even though, like I said, most of the outside was LA, but it was just set dressed. And interesting thing, too, because like I said, back in the days before CGI, some of those shots, what they would do is they would film the street or whatever, then they would back the film up, change the lighting, and then film it again. And like they would layer it like over top of each other. You know what I mean? So they could get like different like weird lighting effects and like weird darks. That's how they used to do it. It's like now it's super easy to like layer stuff, or you can do it digitally. But back then they had to like crank the thing back and film it back over again and film it back over again with like different lighting effects and stuff. And then you just had to
friends of ours just watched this movie for the first time. I think they saw the final cut. They hadn't seen the other cuts. And they were young; they'd never seen the movie before, and they were like, "What was that movie about?" They didn't really get it.
Yeah,
they didn't understand the importance of it either. I think it's young people today they're not impressed by any kind of imagery because they grew up seeing fantastic imagery.
Yeah, you're kind of immersed in it. Yeah, it's hard to go back to.
They couldn't really understand why it was an important movie.
It's hard to go back to because, and I think this happens with a lot of kind of younger, but it's not their fault. It's like they were born after. Right. But a lot of times when you're younger, you'll see stuff that came out, during your formative years. And then when you go back and see the thing that inspired that thing that you saw, you'd be like, yeah, big whoop. I saw this and it was better. But you didn't understand that, like, back in 82, nothing looked like Blade Runner. Right. And it's like now that movie was so influential that it's easy to just look back and get at that and go, yeah, big deal. I've seen Dark City. I've seen Total Recall. I've seen all this other shit, but without realizing it was actually inspired by that. So,
There was a Sean Connery movie that came out, I think, before this, or maybe it was a little bit after. Might have been before. It was called Outland.
I remember that movie.
I haven't seen that in a long time either. About a cop on the moon Io.
I remember that.
They were mining something. He was trying to stop this drug that was coming there. It was making people go crazy.
Now we're gonna have to look at that
one.
Now we're
gonna
see
that one didn't hold up too well.
I know. Now we're gonna watch it and be like, "What the hell?" Now I have to like question the taste of this.
That one probably didn't hold up too well. We'll have to see.
Well, because I feel like I saw like a shit ton of movies when I was younger, like in the late 70s and early 80s, and I figure like if it was super good, then I still remember it.
I remember there was a time where I thought Outland and Blade Runner were about at the same level, but I guarantee you Outland is nothing as cool as Blade Runner.
I'm sure that's not the case.
Right.
Because if it was as good as Blade Runner, everyone would remember it, and I feel like hardly anybody does. Yeah. Like, I remember seeing it, but it didn't make an impression.
Although 2010 held up pretty well.
It did, yeah. We haven't done a review of that yet, have we? We did 2001, but we haven't done 2010 yet. Yeah. Although I much prefer 2001, I have to say. I mean, 2010 was good. Yeah, it was good, but it was more of a kind of standard plot structure, which I'm not so into that.
It was kind of standards, high end 80s.
Yeah. So
80s sci-fi.
That's what I mean. It was a lot more conventional,
right?
And
the way it was made. I mean,
2001. I'm kind of more like I like experimental.
It was a movie for the masses. 2010.
Yeah, exactly, and that's probably why I didn't like it as much. All right. So anyway, we've waffled on and on about the original Blade Runner. Like I said, I'm sure we just had to add our
it's more like commentary because if you haven't seen this, man, you get out of here. If you haven't seen this movie,
we say that about a lot of movies we do on this show. Same reason we do about the Evil Dead and stuff like that. We're just like, get out,
get out of here.
But yeah, so if you haven't seen it, and I'm sure most of you have seen it, if you haven't seen Blade Runner 2049, we also did a review of that, and that was also an amazing movie.
2049, I'd venture to say, is probably a better movie. It's not as earth-shattering,
right? True.
Not as groundbreaking, but 2049, the way that thing looks and what happens in the movie and the scope of that, it's a lot better.
I've watched that movie like so many times, and it's just you can just like sit there and like.
It's up there with Fury Road, different kind of movie, but. In epicness, it's up there.
Yeah.
And hopefully they do a really good job on the new Dune.
Yeah.
Because the same dude who did 2049 is going to do Dune.
Yeah.
And I hope that they have a Dino De Laurentiis style Dune with those uniforms and that look. Man, I love that look.
You have to make that like super epic.
Yeah.
You have to go big or go home. Like I said, you can't just do that.
You gotta do that shit right and get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Because there's so many bad TV series versions of that fucking dude.
It's crazy to me the way it's goofy, like if you don't have like zillions of dollars to make that, just don't bother. Like make something else.
You have to have unlimited resources and super, super good CG.
Because I feel like I feel like this is kind of true of any movie. If you only have like say $1 million to make a movie, make a fucking ghost story set in one room. Yeah. Don't try to make some big epic like sprawling sci-fi thing that's like on 5 planets and shit like that. It's not gonna work out.
In that Dino De Laurentiis Dune, those sets and those costumes make that movie.
Yeah.
Now that. I've seen so many different edits of it. The short theatrical edit actually is the way to go because the more you see of that movie, the more fucked up it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most of that movie is terrible. Terrible. You have to just edit it down just to that theatrical release, or it's just the extended television release version of that. You can see that is just a
See, that was
shit.
the one I saw initially. I didn't see the theatrical cut. I saw
Terrible.
the TV cut, which is like way longer.
Yeah. TV cut's almost like it's almost
And I'm
3
like,
hours
what?
long.
I couldn't even sit through it.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just like sitting there
bad.
going, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
It's like, and I'm not dumb. Like, I can follow stories, and I have read the book and stuff like that. So it's like,
Yeah, and a lot of the acting is really bad with the added acting that they cut.
yeah.
But it's not a movieable movie. At least it wasn't then.
A movieable book, you mean?
Not a movieable book, yeah.
They say that about a lot of stuff, though. Then sometimes they make good stuff later. But
it's like trying to make a movie out of the Old Testament. I mean, there's just too much material there.
And it's contradictory.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, because it was written at like different times by different people, and it's just kind of like a hodgepodge, and it's all cobbled together. But and the thing about Blade Runner too, like getting back to Blade Runner, it's like because there's so many different cuts of it. I mean, if the only thing you've seen is the U.S. theatrical cut with the happy ending and the voiceover and everything like that, I think you should probably see the director's cut, because it's kind of like...
No, it's called the final cut.
Yeah, it's called the final cut. The director's cut is a different thing.
It's a different one.
That was done like under his supervision, but he didn't have final say over it.
You can get the final cut on Blu-ray. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, and I actually like it better. It has a more ambiguous ending. It's a different experience, really.
Yeah, and the tone of it fits in a lot better with Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
So there's continuity there in the tone.
Because I think that's kind of the definitive version, because that's the one that Ridley Scott said, this is how I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Without
Even though I got to tell you,
stuff.
there's some missing scenes, deleted scenes. Some of them still exist. You can find them on YouTube. But there was some stuff that was never shot.
Yeah.
Originally, Roy was supposed to kill Tyrell and then find a secret elevator that took him all the way down underneath that pyramid to where he found the real Tyrell in stasis.
That's right, yeah.
And then he talked to him.
Yeah.
In
Because the one he killed was a replicant.
Right. In the same way that you could talk to somebody while they were in hypersleep in, Prometheus.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So that was one of the reasons why Ford didn't like the movie, because some of the best stuff about the movie was left out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, like you said, they didn't even shoot that. That was in the original.
They had drawings of it though.
Yeah.
Drawings, and they had had it blocked out in some script of what was going to be said, and you were going to find out a lot more about Tyrell and these replicants.
Yeah. But like I said, I think Scott liked to kind of leave it ambiguous, and he liked it better that it was left ambiguous. So that's why it was kind of like that. And like I said, the final cut is probably the one I'd recommend, because that was the one that was closest to what he wanted. And it ties in better with 2049, like you said. If you want to have a double feature one night, set aside 3 or 5, 6
hours. 6 hours.
And watch both of them, just it'll be fantastic. All right, so that'll do it for our latest movie review. Remember, if you like the show, to like, share, subscribe on all your social media and with all your friends and family. Also, if you'd like to financially support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast, or you can go to our blog, which is 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a link in the sidebar to a PayPal account. Remember that our movie reviews come out every Friday. We also have Matinee, which is new movies in the theater. That comes out every Sunday. And we also have our regular episodes, of course, which come out every Tuesday. So check those out if you haven't already. And until next time, bye.